evening, everyone, and welcome to GumGum Sports' first ever esports community mixer. My name is Tia Smith. I'm an account manager here at GumGum Sports. I specialize in esports. So as our first mixer, we wanted this to be more than just a networking event. We wanted an opportunity to showcase a group of leaders in esports, in a particular area of esports. And tonight, we wanted to focus on content creation. So we're gonna go ahead and start things off. And instead of me announcing the panelists' bios, I'm gonna let their work speak for itself.
Comecei lá, eu não sei exatamente o ano, mas era uma época onde o PlayStation 1 tinha acabado de lançar, ou era muito popular na época.
Austin, aka ATX, aka the fastest moving city in Texas and the live music capital of the world. To explore this great city, I brought along Alex Golden Boy Mendez, esports commentator and The Rock's co-host on NBC's Titan Games.
I think my mom really encouraged me to play games is because since my dad was an alcoholic and they were always fighting, I think they would feel bad. My mom was a housewife and my dad was the one that was working.
I found a guy who I believe is pretty good at it.
Gentlemen, do we have an appointment?
Wow, right? So for tonight, we are joined by the creative director for 100 Thieves, Sean Finnegan. We also have Candela, who is a co-founder and esports producer for Spark Studios. And we have Matt Macho Reyes, who is nominated for Esports Videographer of the Year with the Esports Awards, and is a esports producer for MiBR and Immortals. All right, go ahead and kick things off. I'm going to start with Sean. Sean Finnegan is a commercial director and producer, currently serving as senior producer of branded content for 100 Thieves. A decade-long veteran of digital media, he has created and produced commercials, documentaries, branded content, and photography campaigns for some of the biggest and most well-known brands and personalities in gaming, entertainment, and lifestyle. By focusing on authenticity and cinematic storytelling, Sean's earned himself a reputation among brands as a creative, forward-thinking filmmaker for the digital age. So my first question for Sean, prior to 100 Thieves, you worked with IGN on a variety of content series surrounding travel, games, movies, comics, and more. Can you describe the different challenges an esports content producer faces in the gaming environment?
Thanks for having me, Tia, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you all for your time. Yeah, there's a lot of differences. I think esports is a much more engaged audience, and it's a much more long-term audience in terms of the type of engagement. Like back when I was at IGN, we talked about gamers as people who would play lots of different games over the course of a year, and they would look forward to the big releases, and that's a kind of thing of the past. Now you see gamers who are playing a single game for 3 or 4 years, and they put 10,000 hours into it. And so as content creators and as a director and as a filmmaker, my job is to kind of figure out like what kinds of stories and what kinds of content appeal to that audience as opposed to the gamers that I grew up with and that I am, where I play lots of different games and kind of all sorts of different games. And that's something that we're doing at 100 Thieves. Is a lot of our audience is based in Fortnite, it's in Call of Duty, and Apex Legends, and obviously League of Legends. So these are games that people and audiences are playing lots and lots of that game and that game alone, and they're only engaging with personalities and content that surrounds that game. And so it's a different kind of strategy, and it's a different kind of creative process to kind of engage that audience and tell those stories. They differ in very nuanced ways.
So as a creative director for 100 Thieves, that must be a wild job. Can you tell us about managing your team and maybe walk us through what it's like in the day-to-day?
Sure, yeah. My day-to-day is a lot of pre-production and getting clients and salespeople on board with our concepts, right? Like there's a lot of stakeholders when you're working in branded content. There's not only the people like my boss, like Nate Schatz and John Robinson, and who's the president and COO. Obviously, we have like a vision for the type of stuff that we want to make. It's about figuring out the best way to kind of come to terms with what that is and how that melds with whatever the client's goals and expectations are as well. So a lot of my job and my day-to-day is getting like a good sense of what those expectations are, both on the client side and on the content side. And then basically working with my team to generate the ideas and the processes that are going to allow us to get to that like point of success. Once I get to like pre-production, that's the easy part. I've been making films and videos since I was 12 years old. So the process of like writing, shooting, editing, directing, and getting the whole thing packaged up and promoted on the internet, that's like the easy part, and it happens really fast. And luckily we have a great team that's like full of incredible directors and editors who are able to kind of help facilitate that process. But that's kind of what it is. It's a lot of talking, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of like emails back and forth. It's a lot of me trying to convince clients that what I'm telling them they should do is good for them instead of them giving me their terrible ideas. But yeah, it's a lot of fun and it's always changing, and I think that's what I enjoy about it.
Excellent, thank you, Sean. We'll move on to Candela. Candela is a producer, art director, creative advisor, and the founder and creative officer at Spark Studios, an esports-centric production studio specializing in video and film production, photography, VFX, and event media management. She leads a team of creators who have produced content for various brands and teams globally, including Mastercard, Fox Sports, Blast Pro Series, Turtle Beach with Dr. Disrespect, and Thunder Gaming. So Candela, you and your team have worked with large non-endemic brands like Mastercard or agencies like Refresh Entertainment to produce esports content. What is your creative relationship like with those brands during production, and what expectations did these brands set, and how involved were they in decision making? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, by the way. So to begin with, all of those clients are extremely different. Some of those, like Mastercard, are brands that not only have an association with a bigger brand, because their division in esports doesn't exist, so they're trying to insert themselves there while not losing their first brand values. While, tournaments like Pro Blast, they're pure gamings, and all they want, is the best content that's going to reach the audience during the event and after the event to keep generating that audience that's going to stay there for a long time. And so the type of production that we do for each of those is completely different. When we bring a new client in, which often happens really fast, as everything in this Wild West industry, one of the first things we talked about with them is, what are your goals with the content? Like, what are you trying to do? I think in cases like Pro Blast, like it's a tournament, we know exactly what they need. We don't need to do a big assessment of what they're trying to do. We just need to get them to the point where, they're a professional tournament, they're doing good content, they get an audience, they're getting following, and they're getting sales. For them, it translates into sales. For brands like Mastercard, it's more about actually, brands like Mastercard don't really care about the profit in situations where they're trying to insert themselves into a new market. They're more interested in, creating a persona of themselves within that brand, which is a trickier process. But thank God, brands like Mastercard, that are coming from the outside, actually understand that because they have a bigger advertising background. And me and some of the other creatives in Spark right now come from advertising, and so explaining that process to them is much easier. However, like any big brands, they're always trying to get really handsy, with the work. I'm sure all of them here experience this. It's really hard to push the line in between, like, you're participating versus you're not. But thank God, so far, the clients that we've worked with, we've been able to prove based on our past work, that we know what we're doing, and then they're like, okay, like, you're going to do it this way, and trust me, it's going to go well. Otherwise, I promise I'll mowing your lawn, and then they'll actually do it and be like, okay, cool, you can do it now.
Really establishing that relationship.
Yes.
And then Spark Studios has branched out with non-esports clients such as the BET Awards. How do you properly scale your services to meet the needs of such a client? And what are some best practices you follow when managing your team?
I'm going to start with the practices because this is something that I've been forced to change over the last few months because we've been reaching out of esports. The process of collecting a crew to put together to an event, it's much different than it was before. People from outside of esports have, again, like completely different deliverables. A client like Bet, they have this entertainment industry that's completely different audiences. Not all of them are gamers, not all of them are acquainted with the gaming industry, and yet they wanted to put together an experience within Bet that would give a space to gamers in that community. So in that regard, content was king in the sense that we knew exactly what we needed to do for them, for the gamers at that event. But now actually collecting the crew for that event was different because we still needed to allocate resources to what they needed to do afterwards with that content. And so, it all comes down to, unfortunately, like networking and building that network of creators. I have, friends and colleagues that I've worked with before in advertising agencies. We used to do commercial production, and so building a crew that comes from actually broadcast and live television to an event that's recorded and not at all streamed, it's more of a let's train the crew to something new process versus, let's bring the old folks back to this event and try to explain to them what this gigantic network is about.
Right. Thank you. And then finally, Matt. Matt is a content producer for IGC Esports. For the past 2 years, Matt has traveled the world, creating a variety of documentaries, commercials, and player profiles for the IGC brand that includes the LA Valiant, MiBR, Immortals, and now OpTic Gaming. His focus as a producer is to tell the story of the players and teams as they progress per tournament and throughout the year. Working in this industry is very competitive and around the clock, as I'm sure many of us know. However, his passion for video games and cinematography makes it a perfect fit. So Matt, you have been nominated for an Esports Award for Esports Videographer of the Year. From the very beginning, who inspired you to pursue esports content production?
First, I just want to say thank you for having me here. Who essentially persuaded me to get into esports content would be like the founding people that were on YouTube or esports at the beginning would be like FaZe and OpTic. I was a big Call of Duty fan back in the day. I would play video games while I was in high school, not even attend class just because I had the passion to go play video games, trying to be competitive. But at the time, I would still watch YouTube videos. I'd make those silly montages and upload it to YouTube, right? And eventually I made friends that became competitive in the scene today. And they eventually gave me the opportunity to go shoot photos for them and shoot video for them. And just because of the connections I made through the gaming community, I was able to, find myself traveling and making videos. And essentially, it's pretty weird now because one of the creators back then, who's still in the scene now, his name is Hitch. I used to watch his videos where he made Vision. And it's kind of weird now that, Immortals has acquired OpTic Gaming. So it puts me in a weird position to see that. But nonetheless, it's ultimately my gaming experience and just watching those YouTube videos in the beginning and the lifestyle of FaZe, the lifestyle of OpTic, and then now it really persuaded me to do the exact same thing, but do it in a more professional manner with IGC and all the brands that we have together.
And a little bit on just the content that you're creating. When I went to Blast Pro LA, I noticed that the MiBR fan base was the most animated of every other fan base there. There were several other teams. MiBR was just, woo, let's go! How do you inspire that through your content? And is there something that we should know about creating content for South American esports fans?
Right. So everywhere I've been, no matter where it was, for example, Miami, where Counter-Strike, where it wasn't a really huge scene for NA, no matter where we were, if there was a row of 5 Brazilians, they're the loudest, and they're the most energetic out of everywhere in the entire crowd. And it was really amazing to see that just because of who our players are, right? We have Fallen, Taco, Godzera, Phelps, and then many more. It's kind of weird because our roster is changing currently. So but the Brazilian scene is really, really passionate about Counter-Strike and video games as a whole. Because of who they are, they've won 2 majors. They were the best team in the world. They really have good empathy to their fans, and wherever we go, it doesn't matter if we're like stuck in Poland at an airport and we have 5 fans waiting for us. They'll always take photos of them. They'll always engage with them no matter who they are, just because they're from Brazil. They know the struggles they had. They've all played in those cafes or in those homes where they don't have much internet. So they're very faithful, and they're very, what's that word? They really love Brazil. They're very passionate about it. So in terms of South America market, Counter-Strike is really huge over there. Immortals owns Gamers Club, and we try to control what's over there. And Brazil is just, it's amazing. It's amazing. If you guys ever go there, it's a beautiful place. So.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I have a few questions for the group. We have really a wealth of experience here. Between the 3 of you, you have experience with esports teams, tournaments, influencers, broadcast networks, journalist sites, brands, and music videos. We are in Los Angeles, the heart of entertainment industry. Where does esports and gaming content fit into that broader landscape? And why are people choosing your content over other forms of media?
That was for me. Okay. Well, in terms of reaching into other markets, there's a misconception that the content that's being created right now for gamers, specifically classified as esports, is branching into different markets with the goal of breaching creating a bridge in between the gamers and the people that are not gamers. That's a misconception. What really is happening is the content that's living in esports right now in a contained market where we have established channels such as digital media, social media, YouTube, you name it. What's happening is that content is no longer just sustaining that environment, and it's trying to reach traditional medias to reach gamers. I don't mean cable television, although that's actually still happening. But they're not trying to generate a new audience. They're just trying to grow their current audience. They're trying to reach the same audience in bigger channels to create bigger numbers and better impressions. Ultimately, like when you're talking about, for example, broadcast television, the only difference in between broadcast and digital is the cost. Because what you're doing is just reaching a big audience. So it is a very common misconception from broadcast people, from teams that are working on live television right now, like such as Fox, which is a new client. There's a misconception that what they need to do is, throw money at the content so that they can put it on TV. And that's not how it works at all. What they need to do is integrate it with what we're doing in social media so that those audiences are also supportive of the content that they're doing outside and potentially capturing, other friends and families that are watching with them. But it's not generating a new audience, it's expanding a current audience is what's happening. And there's actually a lot of avenues right now, like such as subscription payment methods like Netflix and Hulu. And I'm sure actually everyone on this panel knows about this. There's a lot of content that's coming out soon that nobody really can talk about, but that it's going into that stream of media. And that is happening because there's an opportunity. There's people that wants to pay for it to support their, the gaming idols, like all these Brazilians signing up. And so that's what I think it's happening. It's not so much creating new content, it's expanding the current audience and making it bigger.
Yeah, we're at a really interesting point in, I think, gaming history as it relates to media, because I've been around long enough to where I've seen esports and competitive gaming been spooled up and crashed and burned multiple times. I remember Championship Gaming Series because I was a big Counter-Strike fan, so to see all of my big big idols move off Counter-Strike 1.6 and go to CS Source, which is an inferior game, and have all this advertiser money funneled into this TV show on some dish network that no gamer watches, and see basically that crater the competitive scene. I remember that. And so I've always been very skeptical and always kind of kept a North Star on the content. But what's interesting about the way the content exists now, Tia, you brought it up, is that now the rest of LA, the rest of the world, the rest of the media landscape has noticed that audience that has always been there for gamers is hyper engaged. And not only are they engaged, but they're engaged in a way that's much different than TV and much different than film, because there's there's a, I can't really think of the word, but there's a direct connection there. Like when people watch their favorite streamer, they feel like they're engaging with them directly. When you're tweeting at people, when you're engaging with that social media content, you feel like there's a back and forth, like there's a discussion going on. And when you play games, even single player games, gamers feel like they own part of the experience because their gameplay can differ wildly from someone else's experience playing the same game. And so the way gamers engage with this content is very different, and people are taking notice of that. And frankly, they're asking this question, like, why is it so engaging, and why are gamers so like amped about the content and the content they're consuming, but also the games themselves? And they're asking themselves, like, how can we make money off of this? Because that's what this is about, right? Obviously, like I'm under no delusion that like Old Spice wants to get into esports because they're really interested in League of Legends. Like that's not what's happening here. But it's my job to kind of figure out how do we tell content, well, how do we tell stories to the content that's both helping Old Spice and helping the gamers so that we can all kind of grow, because a rising tide lifts all ships, right? I think that's the difference. Games have been around for a long time. Audiences that are passionate have been around for a long time, and that will be the case long after or before esports was a thing. But it's really interesting now in 2019 because that landscape is so socially focused and connected focused, and that's something that esports has over any other traditional media. Film and TV, as much as I love them, they're passive entertainment. Like you don't engage with Martin Scorsese as much as you would wish to.
Thank you. And then actually, just to flip-flop the questions, since we're already on the topic of monetization, big question surrounding esports is monetization. Traditional sports have TV broadcasts, stadium attendance, merch, concessions, etc. to earn revenue. Since esports is mainly digital, 80 to 90% of revenue in esports is generated from sponsorship advertising and digital content. From your perspective, what could esports apply from other entertainment sectors to improve opportunities to monetize? And what types of content drive fans to engage with sponsors?
I'll speak directly by using an example that's been on my lap recently, which is the introduction of Fox. In traditional advertising, we rely on celebrities and movies and, the general release of content that, generates that popcorn excitement around something to generate money, Whether a movie or a TV show is successful later on, it really all comes down to the launching of the strategy. Now, it could still get 2% on Rotten Tomatoes, but if the launch strategy was good, they're going to make money. That's generally the rule. With esports, what's happening with these traditional brands that are not applying this is that, they have this misconception that all esports influencers and gamers are celebrities alike. And what's really happening is something that he touched on earlier, which is, this is an audience that's incredibly engaged with individual teams and players and even content creators, like this to have their own fans. And so these attachments that the audiences create with these influencers, let it be creators, players or influencers, streaming and streamers, in general, what it really represents is like it's part of who they are, right? Why do they, OpTic goes down, because they get absorbed by Immortals, and then nobody wants to create content now. And really what's happening is people are just like suffering a death, like they're just attached to something about them that they can explain, but it's so rooted to who they believe they are. And so from traditional advertising, like there are concepts that we could apply, like, yes, there is a treatment to how you can monetize the audience of a celebrity, what we consider a person of influence, but it's not the same approach. It's an approach that different to traditional, where you give them a script and you tell them exactly what they need to do. This is an audience that you just blindly trust on and put their money, you put the brand's money onto the influencer's mouth and he'll do his job. And that's because if it's not raw and organic and natural, it's just not going to work. And it's not because, they're divas, although in some cases they could be. What really is happening is, their audience is an extension of themselves. There really is. It's a personal connection. And so if they don't believe in the product and they don't promote it like they want to, it's not going to work. And so traditionally, what would I apply? Yes, the method of actually generating that content and that strategy around an influencer is good, but it's a little bit less hands-on creative when it comes to the actual narrative of it. It has to be left on, the gamers, the brands, the sponsors, like people like 100 Thieves, they have a really good, they understand the audience, and so you just have to really just give them the money and let them do their thing for it to be successful.
Yes, give us more money and we will be successful. Monetization, this is a tough one. Yeah, exactly. I think owning your own platform is huge. There are a lot of people out there who were very, very successful on YouTube who weren't able to build sustainable brands because you can't when you're giving 40% of your revenue to a different platform. No matter how many millions of views, that's just not sustainable. Something I learned a lot from my time at IGN was that while we generated far less views and far less engagement on the .com, those views were worth 100 times more because we own every single part of that site and we monetize way better on it. So I think you're seeing brands and influencers looking for opportunities to either drive up the revenue that they're driving on platforms where they don't have total creative control, like for instance YouTube or on Twitch, or supplementing that income and monetizing via external platforms where there's a direct-to-consumer relationship. Things like Indiegogo, Kickstarter, obviously the big one right now is Patreon. That is another way that people are taking more ownership and monetization ability of the content that they're already creating via the internet. But that's kind of the big sort of elephant in the room, is like, how do you move away from a platform like YouTube when that is the most accessible thing in the world? You want to be on YouTube because that's where a huge amount of your audience is going to be, or on Twitch if you're a streamer. But if you're not monetizing well and your goal is sustainability over time, then that's something you're going to want to look to move away from. IGN, we were very lucky in that we have been a .com since 1997, and so that brand has been well established, and people go to that site every single day. But it's a challenge that we face at 100 Thieves, and we're just very lucky right now that that's actually not our goal. Like, we're monetizing, we're not interested in that, right? Well, we're interested in it, but it's kind of lower on the priority list. Right now, our goal is to build the brand, get our content out to the most widespread audience, and sort of like create an identity, because we're very lucky in that we have big funding behind us. We just closed a Series B round of funding for $35 million, and that allows people like me to kind of like not have to compromise on content so that we can make something that's truly special, and in that way create sustainability.
All right, one more question. Courage, Dr. Disrespect, Paco, how do you work with the variety of esports talents and personalities?
I could talk about that one. For my position specifically, since the team travels a lot and we boot camp a lot and we practice a lot, it's fairly hard to get content from them, especially me trying to be super friendly with them and trying to be friends with them. At the end of the day, like, they're doing their job and I'm here trying to do my job. So when it comes to shooting Fallen, he's a big politician. He owns various different businesses that he has. At the same time, he's one of the biggest Brazilian stars in the world for Counter-Strike. And he's the easiest to work with, like, by far, because he understands the business, he understands content, and he understands the deliverables that we have to make. But when it comes to, for example, when we had Coldzera was very, I want to win, I don't want to talk to you. I just want to keep practicing till 2 a.m., keep playing CS, and that was fairly hard for me to get because they didn't understand that side of content and making deliverables. And the way that I, try to ease their way out is to just try to say that, you have fans, you have people that want to watch you. You're one of the biggest Brazilian teams in the world, right? You should owe it to your fans to shoot this. And at the end of the day, sometimes it doesn't work. I have to get the manager to pull them out to really shoot with me. And it's really hard when you're a personality or if you're a competitor. You can have Dr. Disrespect and Courage, who, that's what they live for. They do content every day, they stream every day. But when you're a competitive player, you're not really there to stream or create YouTube. You're just there to play and win trophies. So you really have to ease your way in and be friends with the people that I shoot with. Like, I shoot with MiBR, OpTic Gaming, LA Valiant, and it's very different per game. You have Overwatch, who's a very young, established audience, and then you have Counter-Strike, who are the people that are more mature and a little bit older. So me being like only 21, I could be the medium for both, right? So I could hang out with, let's say, Agilities from Overwatch and be his best friend. And then I could go to Coldzera, who's like 23, but he's won 2 big majors, and he could just flick me off and just not say anything to me, right? But it's really interesting to see how there's 2 different personalities and there's 2 different mindsets when it comes to shooting content. And you just really have to, persuade them and really talk to them and be their friend. And at the end of the day, like, the way that I get to know people is just talking to them and being friendly with them, and then they'll work with me, because at the end of the day, like, this is a business where we are here to make money, and at the end of the day, like, they're here to practice and win. So.
Yeah, actually, I can vouch for the MiBR team being the easiest to work with. I often at events I stumble upon him, and we can't talk because we're both busy, but their team is, one of the best and my favorites. So working with personalities, from my perspective, is very different to his. You're really attached to the players, and he's absorbing the content. And in my situation, it's more of like, come to set, make things happen, leave. So it's not so much a previous involvement with them. It's more so of like a logistical, hey, what's up? I'm the producer. You're gonna do this now. And that is not the easiest conversation to have. But I'm usually in that situation when I'm the bridge in between the brand paying and the influencer getting paid. And so we need to have that, happy medium. Ultimately, influencers, Dr. Respect, we actually, had him on the reel. He was working with us for a spot that we did for Turtle Beach and Astralis. Like the original script came from the sponsors, Dr. Disrespect was pumped about it. But really what it came down to making him work in it was, having an active participation in the creative process from a difficult influencer, right? And when I mean difficult, I mean, he has a really big brand. He has something to stand for. He might be getting paid a lot right now to do a commercial, but it's not going to worth anything in a year if he loses his audience. So in reality, he has a reason to be picky as he is. That is his business. His brand and his persona is his business. So with people like Dr. Disrespect, I've never worked with Courage, but I would assume that it's the same. It's about bringing those creatives, because they are creatives, into the process and trying to find, that happy medium where it's working exactly how they think it should work, because they know the language and the audience better than anyone else, and trying to make money for the sponsors. So my job is more so, that happy medium of like, okay, like, tell me what you didn't like from the script so that I can understand it and translate it. Because, a gamer is going to go to the sponsor and be like, this shit. Like, this doesn't work. And the sponsor is going to be like extremely offended. It's like, we're not working together anymore. But in reality, what the influencer is saying is like, hey, I don't think this is going to work. The audience is not going to like that, but they're not saying it the right way. So in my case, it's more of like, translation services, just sit in the middle, making it work for all the parties and making sure that the creator is involved as much as possible so that that content, doesn't lose its value. Like, if you guys have seen that commercial, it's all about enhancing the qualities of Dr. Disrespect. He's a great trash talker, and that's what it's all about, leveraging something about his audience that they love about him, but benefiting the brand, and that's it.
Yeah, it's about creating shared value between all the parties involved, right? Like, everyone wants to gain something from it, and if you're smart and you're clever about how you approach it, you can take 1 and 2 and make 5 or 6, and sometimes 10 if you're really smart. So that's kind of what my job is. Like, I'm very lucky in that we have a lot of trust. There's been a very strong relationship of trust between 100 Thieves, the production team, and the creators. Like, when I wrote and directed the Courage announcement video, there was like, we came up with this idea, this concept. I wrote it out. We kind of like brainstormed it. We, came to a place where we thought it was going to be really great, and we put it in front of Courage. And already he was like, this is really interesting. This is very different. It's not like some other announcement video. So I'm in, but I just want to make sure. He expressed his like concerns. Like, I don't want it to be cheesy. I wanted to make sure that it is kind of who I am as well, because it's obviously his announcement video. And like Matt pointed out, like, these people, that is their business. They're businessmen, they're businesswomen themselves. They have a vested interest in this stuff as well, obviously. So it's about creating a shared value with them and making sure that all of their concerns are heard, and not just heard, but that they're also part of the creative process. We did a lot of brainstorming on set when I directed that too, that wasn't in the script. And a lot of the most funny parts were things that we both came up with in the moment that we saw that we thought might be funny. There are a lot of ones that you didn't see too that we came up with that weren't funny, but that is filmmaking. That's the beauty of it. I love working with talent because every single one of them is different, but not only are they just different from one another, but they're all different every time. So it's like a puzzle that has to be solved every time you go around the clock, right? Like a different project, a different script, a different talent, a different goal, and it's never, ever boring. And that's what makes that interesting. But I think like that's what draws every one of us to it, like not just from the creative side, but also from the client side. Like there's an opportunity for every project to kind of go bigger and go like better, to create even more opportunity for money or fame or value or storytelling or impact, which the latter two I'm more interested in. Although money's nice.
Money is nice. So we have about 5 or 10 extra minutes for questions for anyone in the group. We have the catch box. This has a microphone in it. So if I toss it, if you have a question, I can toss it to you. You can just speak right into the microphone. So does anyone have a question? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. So do I just, oh, wow, this is really cool. So I have a question regarding 100 Thieves. First off, congratulations on that announcement video. I know it went trending worldwide, and it was probably one of the coolest introducement videos ever seen. My question is kind of on the flip side, on the competitive end. How do you strategize your content for them when, as Matt addressed earlier, it's very hard when all they want to do is compete and practice all day? How do you strategize to get content out of them in this space?
There's a little bit of a give and take and a push and pull, and sometimes it can get a little tense, but luckily we have a very strong leader in Nadeshot, and Nadeshot goes out of his way to make sure that everyone who comes to be a part of the organization, both on the competitive side or the content side or sales or marketing or any of the aspects of the business, really fits the culture and is understanding like what we're all trying to do and that we're all on the same team. So like I was just in Miami for CWL Miami, and I don't know if you guys follow Call of Duty out there, but the last 2 majors 100 Thieves won back to back. We are the best team in the world. But at CWO Miami, we did not play very well. We got 6th, and that was a huge disappointment for us. But we still had to shoot content. We still had to figure out a way to make videos because we have to hit our targets. We have to do this stuff. And working with the players to figure out, okay, I understand you don't want to talk to us right now because you've had a shitty weekend. Yeah. But how can we make that better? And how can we kind of both come to what we need to get done? And more often than not, because we've done our homework and because they're used to the way we work, we're able to find a middle ground to where we're not stepping on anyone's toes, but we're also making sure that we're telling a very compelling story that is the heart of what it was. So for us, when this episode comes out on Tuesday, it will be about what it was like to kind of crack under the pressure from being the top team in the world and what that means for how we run up to the championships, which is next month. And that's tough stuff to talk about, and a lot of credit to the players who put themselves in a pretty vulnerable position by doing it. But we're very lucky in that they're open to doing that and that we can kind of work towards it. But yeah, it's not easy sometimes. And I mean, I can definitely put myself in that position where anytime I've had a shitty day, I don't want to talk to anyone. Yeah, so I get that.
They use it as like a wake-up call for them with the biggest tournament coming up.
Yeah, I mean, like that even might be our headline. Like, it was a wake-up call for champs. Like, we didn't come out, we came out a little bit flat, and like we like, you know, we clawed our way back into it a couple of matches. Like we 3-0'd OpTic, but when we came back against Gen G, like minor things were going wrong, and it was just coming, it all came, like it kind of just boiled over and we cracked. And it's fine because you can't win every single one of them, and I think people understand that, but it wasn't up to our standards, and that's part of the story. That's part of the content, and the audiences are going to see that. And it's important that they see that because one misstep in the storytelling, like everyone watching that game and everyone following 100 Thieves knows that was a disappointment. So if that video comes out and we don't say it was, and we're all happy and dandy and like, well, that wasn't a big deal at all. Like, they know we're betraying them, and we know that we're betraying ourselves as storytellers. So it's about kind of figuring out with the players in a collaborative process how to address these things and get to where we all need to be.
Right. Thank you.
I think we need to pass it back.
How's it going, guys? Name's Alex. A question for all of you guys. I'll stand up. With Gears of War putting out content on live TV and at the same time integrating it to YouTube, there comes an audience that isn't very much expecting the same kind of production drama that comes with the TV show, and also on the different mindset. With OpTic Gaming having different fans that are not going to be looking forward to the transition to something else like that. What is the mindset that you guys go into with both the audience that says, oh, this isn't real sports, don't put this on TV, why is it on here? Or somebody that's transitioning from, people are leaving from one team to another, or teams are being, integrated into other teams. Like, what is the mindset and focus that you guys move with when you guys are focusing into that content?
Yeah, so predominantly for the OpTic Gaming side, I really don't know much about, the Gears of War scene, right? That's what you asked, right?
Well, they're Gears of War Esports is doing something called Brotherhood and Betrayal, and they put it on every Friday, where they speak into the different personalities that are in different teams and what it means, and pretty much moving the focus into Gears of War 5.
I just watched like the list that they released on Danny, one of my favorites. Fucking love Danny. If you haven't watched Danny, you have to go watch his content. He's great. I think there's a couple things that you mentioned to talk about. First one being, what is the relationship of that content that they're trying to do with the audience that's rejecting that content. The reason why that content is being rejected, I don't think it's because of the aim of it, as in like, how it's going to be transmitted, how it's going to be released. I think it's related to, like we were going back earlier, knowing that this audience knows this player better than the producers, and so they know that they're making mistakes on the content. This goes back to something he was saying, if a team doesn't do well in a tournament, it's very easy not to put an episode out. It's really hard to put a good episode out for that audience. So to me, that's where I differentiated good creators versus, I was going to use team names and I shouldn't do that right now, versus bad teams with content. And the difference is, like, if you know your audience, you know what you're doing, the content is going to be king. Now, in that situation, the audience knows the mistakes in that piece, right? Like, I know Danny. I love him to death. I used to be head of content for Ghost Gaming. I used to drive content for him. And our content wasn't doing well because, it wasn't driven into how we knew that we were making mistakes. We knew that we weren't allowed to talk about things because it wasn't benefiting the team. And that's, finding it, like he was saying, is finding that happy medium in between what the real story is, and people know the real story, versus what you want to talk about it. And when you talk about something that's not the right thing, people are not going to take it. So as creators, it's very painful when we're not allowed to do that, because we know the player, it's like a friend to us, like we are there to support their growth with our content. So in that case specifically, I think the problem is not the audience rejecting the format, is the audience rejecting the story of it. Because, there's a lot of mistakes in that story, and I know that personally from working with Danny, and I know that his fans know that, even Danny, like talking on social media, like, this is not accurate, and when it comes down to, I think the second, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the second part of your question was, what do we do with the audience from OpTic Gaming rejecting what's happening? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure, because it was a double question.
Yeah, sorry.
Again, I think that comes down to what he was saying. It's an attachment, right? Like, the people are suffering a death right now. And I say that and it sounds like an exaggeration, but it really is. We have friends of ours that we talk to every day that are content creators for that team, and they really are suffering. Like, they're like, tomorrow's my last day, next week is my last day, and they're not having a good time. So anything that comes, that audience not seeing what they want to see, which is OpTic being OpTic, right now it's not going to work. I don't think the creators of that content are doing anything wrong at all. The content is good. I just think it's not the right time. And sometimes times is everything for, content release.
Yeah, sometimes it's just timing. You kind of got to go with the flow, right? Like or 2 or 3 splits ago, we played really well. 100 Thieves played really well in LCS, our League of Legends team. We were number 1. We were doing really well. Everyone hated us. And then last split, we were terrible. We got 10th place, and we have 2 of the best players in the world. On paper, our squad is the best in the world, and we are the dead last. And now everyone wants us to win. And so, like, that goodwill, it fluctuates, and you kind of just got to keep your finger on the pulse in order to be able to figure out what that right angle is. And as a storyteller, that's kind of my job, is like, be invested in the audience, be invested in the stories, and kind of figure out where it goes, right? Because like, we all know what a good story feels like, whether or not we think we do, but we've all been reading books and watching movies, and we all saw season 8 of Game of Thrones, so like, we know what bad storytelling is. Like, everyone knows, so like, as long as you can kind of stay ahead of that, you can kind of weather the storm, but you can't always control it, you know? Like, sometimes you'll be the hero, sometimes you'll be the villain.
All right, we are out of time for this evening. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you everyone for coming. Please feel free to stick around and mingle. We have plenty of food and drinks.
By the way, that credit announcement was really fucking fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I went to
Yeah.